for most students attending high school, it's a pretty busy time. Balancing studies, sports, and hanging out with friends sounds pretty typical. I'm here today speaking to Mackenzie, a typical high school student who is also a childhood cancer survivor. Welcome, Mackenzie.
Thank you.
Tell me about what you enjoyed about school before you were diagnosed. What was a typical day like for you?
Well, as I was growing up, I loved going to school. I loved learning and that kind of stuff, which is kind of weird for a teenager. Most kids don't like going to school, but I actually loved it. And my favorite part about school is, you know, hanging out with friends and playing sports at school. I love sports, so that's kind of a really big part of my life before I was diagnosed.
You love doing physical activity. You love sports. At one stage, doing a sports activity, you became very, very fatigued.
So when I was playing basketball in March of 2013, so that's almost 2 years ago now, I was just noticing that I was super tired and I couldn't keep up to the people that I was usually much faster with. And, you know, it was just really out of the ordinary, but at first I kind of just, you know, brushed it off, thought, you know, I'm probably just tired from playing so much. And it wasn't until one morning that I couldn't actually get out of bed. I was just physically too tired. And then we finally went to my family doctor, and that's when she noticed that one of my blood counts were low. And then after months of just being told that I probably had a virus and my body would just get better on its own, but there was nothing the doctors could do until then, and I just needed to wait. My blood count started getting worse, and then I needed a bone marrow biopsy just to see what was going on, and that's when I was finally diagnosed with myelodysplastic syndrome.
When you heard the word cancer, tell me what you felt like.
I mean, it's pretty devastating, especially being that I was just 16 years old. I knew that I was going to have to get a bone marrow transplant and have to get that kind of thing and go to the hospital and miss out on a lot of things. I didn't really know right away what that looked like. Like I said before, I loved going to school, loved playing sports, and at first when I thought I had a virus, I was so concerned about it. I was like, oh no, I can't have mono, that's awful, I don't want to take a few months off school like that. And now it's kind of funny looking back on that, but it was, you know, pretty devastating to have to take so much time, and ended up being that after my transplant I needed to stay in, they call it house isolation, for 6 months, so I couldn't leave the house and I could only have 1 or 2 visitors coming because I had such a weak immune system. So I ended up losing a year of school and losing a year and a half of sports, but you know, you get through it and you just keep a positive attitude, and now I made it through and playing sports again. So
let's go back to the support. Who helped you through that time that you were in hospital and going through treatment? Who were those folks?
Well, one of my biggest supporters was my best friend Megan. She was just like really amazing, hung out with me at least once a week, and if I was at the hospital, always Skyped, and she was just one of the biggest supporters. The community was huge. Since I needed a bone marrow transplant from an anonymous donor, I reached out to the community and we did a bunch of swabbing events to get people signed up to see if they might be my match or, you know, someone else in the world. And then the supporters from the doctors and my family for sure. The last person that I would say kind of is my biggest support, and it's not really one person but a bunch, is the children at the hospital. So when you're at Sick Kids and at KGH at the Cancer Center, you can just see those other little kids, you know, 5 or 6 years old fighting. And it's really hard to watch them fight, and they kind of give you the inspiration to keep going because they're so young to even know what's really going on, and they just keep the most positive attitude, and they are just having so much fun all the time in the hospital, playing games and laughing, and you kind of get strength from them because you're kind of just seeing the suffering that they're going through, and if they can do it, then you can too. Yeah.
What about your parents? How did they feel initially?
Well, my dad always says that having a child with cancer or with any type of disease really is all consuming. So it just, every day you're just worried about it. It puts your whole life on hold. My parents had to take time off work. My sister took a few months off school. And it really affects the whole family, and not just me, myself, going through the treatment, but it affects them because they don't want to see you hurting. They don't want to see you in pain and all that kind of stuff. They want to my parents said repeatedly how they wanted to take away the pain and help as much as they could, but obviously they can't do that, right? But yeah, so I definitely affected them, and it's kind of, it brings you together as a family just to push through and get through difficult times.
And what about now? Now that you have been through treatments and you are back to doing normal activities, how about now? How are they feeling now? Do
My
you
parents?
know?
They're super proud of me. I mean, they have seen they're the ones who kind of, I say they know what I went through better than I did myself, because I was feeling so awful through the treatments that I don't even really remember half of them, to be honest with you. So they're the ones who actually remember so specifically what I went through, and they know what happened.
How many other people were waiting for bone marrow transplants?
So in Canada, they say it's about 800 to 1,000 that are waiting at any time. And last year in Canada, only 50% of people found a match. So, yeah.
So you were very lucky. Mm-hmm. When you found the match, what was the first thing that went through your head?
Well, it's actually really overwhelming. I don't even know how to describe it. It's amazing to know that someone is willing to, you know, people say that it's a little bit painful to donate, and you're asleep for the donation, but still you're taking time off work or taking time out of your day, and it's such an amazing thing to think that someone, you know, went through all of that for me and to save my life. And I remember being at the hospital and receiving my transplant, and you actually receive it through just like a blood transfusion, so just through the IV. And I remember just like looking up at the bag and being like, I can't believe that someone did this for me. It's just, I don't even know how to describe how grateful I am.
During your treatment time, you went through several things, and what was the treatment that made you feel the most tired, the most sick at that time?
So the thing that I struggled with the most was for the transplant, you get chemo for a very short time and a ton of chemo just to completely wipe out your system of the bone marrow throughout your body. So I received 8 days of, they say 8 months worth of chemo in that short time, and it was all 8 days in a row. And I was, you know, dealing with a lot of issues from that, a little bit of liver issues, possible, you know, graft versus host disease. I was very lucky to not have, I'll describe what that is. So graft versus host disease is when the bone marrow is kind of rejecting in the body and attacking because it realizes it's in the wrong body. And I was starting to get a little bit of that, but luckily they were able to stop that. So I'm very lucky that I didn't have, you know, major complications from that. And I also, from the chemo, I had really bad mucositis. So it's so mucositis is mouth sores throughout the whole, your whole digestive system. So it goes all the way from the mouth, all the way through the intestines and that kind of stuff. And it's really painful. So I wasn't actually able to eat for about 2 weeks from that. And I had to get IV food for everything. So that was probably one of the hardest things that I had to deal with.
When you were diagnosed, you had to stop going to school. Are you back to school now?
Yes, so I had to take a year off school when I was getting treatments, and then I was able to return to school at Holy Cross this September. And I am a year behind, but I'm a grade 12 student in grade 11 classes, but it's okay. I mean, of all the things that could have gone wrong, one school year behind is not something that I can't deal with, right? So,
while you were in the hospital, you had mentioned that you watched the children and enjoyed the children in order to pass the time. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I kind of made a few little friends that were also going through cancer treatments. A ton of them are, you know, have gone through so much more than I have. So much that I can't even explain. There was a little boy who has been in the hospital for over a year, and just those kids, they fight every day and they struggle so much. I mean, it's not something that a child should have to go through. There's a little girl that she received her transplant at the same time as me, but unfortunately it wasn't successful, so she had to get a bunch of experimental treatment, and so far none of that has been working. So she's been fighting since she was 2 years old when she was originally diagnosed. She has been fighting all since then, and she's now 7 or 8. So literally her whole life has been growing up just knowing hospitals and she's never had long hair and she's always been bald, and like all these things that, you know, children shouldn't have to go through. And it's really hard to see that happening, but it's amazing how positive they are, and they're always smiling. And one thing that the parents always say about them is like, if you looked at the child, you would not know that they were sick because they don't know any different, right? But the suffering and stuff that they have to go through, it's just not fair for them.